So when I'm talking about politics, I always hate to use the word evil. It's overused, and it's used as a license to hate your political opponents. And that's actually a misuse of the word. Evil is a living force in the world that acts to destroy the souls of human beings. It's an actual intentional force in the world. And I think, the Bible says the devil prowls like a lion, and I think you should mourn when the lion devours the souls of one of your fellow human beings, because if you're distracted by saying, he's corrupt, he's the bad guy, the lion is sneaking up behind you. He loves your anger, he drinks your hatred, he loves your superior pride and all that stuff. That's meat and drink to the devil. But on the other hand, the pity that we feel for suffering people is often abused to cause us to condone evil. And, this is why in Dante's Inferno, in the Inferno of the Divine Comedy, Dante is told not to pity the damned. And it's very hard for him because it's very human. He sees people he knew suffering in the fires of hell, but he's told you can't pity them. And I think the reason for that is that to pity them is to essentially condone the evil that they now represent, because they're now in eternity. They're now done with their lives. There's no chance of their being redeemed, so he's not supposed to pity them. Evil, I can't help noticing, tends to progress in these three stages. They bring it to you in terms of pity. You have to be compassionate. And then there's a period of darkness or silence or secrecy where they say, don't look at this. And then they use force. So, for instance, they say, oh, look, there's the poor unwed mother, don't you pity her? She needs to have an abortion. You have to let her have an abortion. And then it's, don't you show that picture of an abortion. I'm going to turn over your table on campus if you put out a picture of an abortion, because anybody looking at it can see that it's murder, that it's evil. And then when they've gotten enough people to pity the poor mother and understand that it's her human right to kill her baby and all that stuff, that's when they use force. That's when suddenly you get Roe v. Wade. It's a human right. It's a human right to slaughter. If you protest it, they're going to bang down your door at night and carry you away. It's a human right. The same thing with the sexualization of children. Here's Florida's really spectacularly great governor, Ron DeSantis, with CBS's Norah O'Donnell, and she goes after him for saying that teachers shouldn't be teaching sexuality in class. Cut one.
Most gay people say they knew they were gay since they were a kid, but they've known most of their life they were gay.
But here's the question. What does that have to do with math class or English class or history class? So
should they feel accepted in schools?
Should there
be tolerance?
Everyone should be accepted, 100%.
See, that's the right answer, because she's saying, you must have pity, the bullies, the people are being bullied. Oh, are they accepted? And he's saying, you're teaching math. Stop sexualizing the children. So now the Senate holds a hearing on book banning, right? Because this is the next thing, you're violating the rights. It's a human right to show any book you want to little children, right? And the Illinois Secretary of State, Alexi Giannoulis, I think his name is, shows up to defend their law, the Illinois law, banning the banning of pornographic books for children. And John Kennedy of Louisiana, in a truly gutsball political play, it was a really great thing, simply read the book, something called like All Boys Aren't Blue or something like this. And I'm not going to play it here because I'm sure many of you have seen it online, because it is just pornographic descriptions of gay sex. And it says on the book that it's for 10-year-olds. It's for 10-year-old children. It's fifth grade, so it's elementary school. And because he's violating this rule, because the minute you hear it, you think it's not banning a book to keep that away from children. And then he does the same thing that DeSantis did to Norah O'Donnell. He turns to the Secretary of State from Illinois, and this is what he says, cut two.
Mr. Secretary, what are you asking us to do? Are you suggesting that only librarians should decide whether the two books that I just referenced should be available to kids? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay. Tell me what you're saying.
Well, first of all, there's this...
Don't give me a speech. Tell me what you're asking me to do.
With all due respect, Senator, the words you spoke are disturbing, especially coming out of your mouth is very disturbing. But I would also tell you that we're not advocating for kids to read porn, to Senator Booker's point.
What are you advocating for?
We are advocating for parents random parents not to have the ability, under the guise of keeping kids safe, to try and challenge the world view of every single manner on these issues.
Is that amazing? Of course he's asking to sexualize children through reading these books. What is he talking about? Random parents. How did these parents become random? They're the parents of the children. The teachers are random. The teachers just happen to be there. The parents gave birth to, nurtured, and loved this child. There is no guarantee that the Secretary of State of Illinois he doesn't know their names. But that question, what is it you want? What are you looking for here? Once you read the book, you hear that long silence? Once you read the book, he can't say, I want children to read this book, because that is what he wants. That's what they all want. They want to sexualize and queer, as they call it, children. Now, once you get people to pity the poor bullied gay boy, and once you get people to say, oh, it's a human right, oh my goodness, you don't want to take away their right to read, graphic porn, but it's not graphic porn. Just don't read it out loud, because then we'll see it's graphic porn, but don't do that. Then they bring the force. Here is Assemblywoman Lori Wilson proposing a law that has now passed the Assembly, I believe, full of pity for trans children. She wants to pass a new law. It's cut 4.
If you have a 7-year-old who's talking about they believe that they are not the same gender as they are biologically, then it should be affirmed. By saying and rejecting it in wholesale, then you're essentially rejecting your child.
Yes, this is true, because when my child comes to me with a blanket on for a cape and says, I'm Superman, I'm going to go jump off the roof, if I don't say, son, you jump off that roof because you're Superman, then I am rejecting that child. What the hell is she talking about? But the law passed because they've got the power to do it. California is a one-party state, and what it says. Now, here's the other thing, because they have to lie, because the light of day exposes them. What it says is basically that in a custody battle, the judge should include a consideration of whether one of the parents rejects their need for transgender care. It doesn't mention transgender, but that's what it's all about. And they keep saying, well, it doesn't say you lose custody, but come on, it's a threat. It's a psychological threat, and we all know it is. And that, this is the thing. It doesn't take custody away yet, but it sets up for that. And they say it doesn't, but that's what it's for, because you're rejecting that child if that child comes to you and says, I'm a mermaid, and you don't let that child swim underwater till he's dead, you are rejecting that child. The problem for the left is that when you get to the stage of force, you are not dealing with a country that is used to being pushed around. Now, I understand. We went through the pandemic and people were pushed around. They were scared. They've been scared by climate change panic, and this is the idea, to keep the panic going all the time. You always got to be panicked because you can't think. You got to make a decision. Give me the power. No. That's the way they want it. But when it goes too far, when it gets to be force, people start to fight back. In New Mexico this week, Governor Lujan Grisham declared an emergency on gun violence and said that it gave her the right to strip people of their Second Amendment rights, even though the laws in New Mexico guarantee those rights. And there was a recent Supreme Court decision saying that those rights are, in fact, guaranteed. Here she is announcing this emergency measure.
If there's an emergency, and I've declared an emergency for a temporary amount of time, I can invoke additional powers. No constitutional right, in my view, including my oath.
And the pity comes out again. What about these people being killed? They have constitutional rights too. But of course, no criminal, as she herself admitted, by the way, no criminal is going to give up his guns because she declares an emergency. So all she's doing is disarming the public. She's disarming the public so they can be slaughtered like sheep. And they deserve it anyway, because it's a systemic racist country. So you would think, like, oh my, how could this happen? But in fact, it really hasn't happened. The police wouldn't enforce it. The Attorney General, who is, like her, a Democrat, said, this is unconstitutional. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to sue. I'm not going to fight for you. A judge had a temporary restraining order. And so people do push back. The wheels are really coming off. And the Biden administration, twice, 2 courts have told the Biden administration, stay away from social media, because it has been shown, proved beyond a reasonable doubt, that the administration cajoled, tricked, and threatened a fairly willing social media into rigging the last election by withholding evidence. They withheld Hunter Biden's laptop. They silenced the president of the United States. And they basically, during the pandemic, they only let out the party line, most of which turned out to be wrong. Masks don't help. There are some side effects to the vaccine. I think the vaccine actually helped certain people in certain groups endangered, but they pushed it down our throats. They said they mandated it. Now they're saying we didn't mandate it, but they did. So the Biden administration is now appealing this to the Supreme Court. Why? Because without silence, they can't win. And I don't think they're going to win this in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has already decided cases similar to this. They are trying to silence protected speech through businesses and saying, well, it's not the government doing it, it's the social media, but we all know that is wrong. They're scared, and they should be scared because their corruption is being exposed, and not just their corruption, but their massive failures. If you want more spectacular content, like and subscribe, and also please subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show wherever you get your podcasts.